Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Libby Book Club for WA. I'm your host, David Allan-Petale. I'm a local author, and I'd like to acknowledge that I'm broadcasting to you tonight from the traditional lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people. I pay my respects to elders, past and present. Our guest tonight is Deborah Pike, and she's going to be talking to us about her book, The Players, which is her debut novel, but Deborah's also written quite a few non-fiction titles as well. Now, tonight's chat is interactive, as always. You can put any questions you like in the chat just to the side, and I'll weave them into the conversation that I'll have with Deborah. And of course, this is all brought to us for free by Libby, Overdrive, and the State Library of WA. So, Deborah, welcome to the Libby Book Club for WA. How are you going tonight?
I'm really well. Thank you, David. It's a joy to be here. So,
Well, it's a joy to have you here. I've got to say, the Players, the name itself is very suggestive of theatricality, but this is also a book about a group of young people who put on a play, The Marriage of Figaro, and in doing so, it brings them together and ignites a tying together of their destinies across multiple continents and across decades. But that's a very high look at it. Can you tell us what The Players is about?
yeah, well, it's a work of literary fiction, the first half set in Western Australia. It's very much an ensemble narrative about a group of young amateur actors who, quite rightly, rehearse a play. They meet one summer and rehearse a play in an orchard. And the troupe consists of 6 main players. There's Veronica, who's the daughter of a Czech immigrant, who's an aspiring actress, we find out later. Her boyfriend, the wealthy and ambitious Sebastian. There's Cassie, who is a somewhat histrionic character. There's Gloria, originally a refugee from Timor-Leste. Joshua, a labourer on the orchard. And Felix, the director, who's an exchange student from Germany. So they do stage the play, The Marriage of Figaro, and then the novel traces their afterlives across the globe over about the next 10 years. So it's about their interconnections. It's about their ambitions, their desires, their hopes. They also confront their pasts to some extent. So it's also about the power of art and the power of art to bring people together and to affect them.
So I thoroughly connected to this. I was a drama student in high school. I also went to Whopper, so putting on plays, and I did broadcasting though. I didn't do anything theatrical, but I put on many plays, and having this experience captured in a work of art like this for me was transformative, because whenever I try to explain to people who weren't in a play what it was like to put one on, I was lost for words. I now have the players to at least give me a taste of that. What do each of the characters you've just described to us? There's 6 main characters. Together, what does putting on the play mean to them? But then individually, what are they each seeking to get out of doing this?
Yeah, I think they're looking to have an exciting new encounter, a challenge to bring a freshness, a new dimension to their existence. They're also looking for friendship. I also think the opportunity of being in a play allows people, especially young people, a moment to raise the stakes, if to use a dramatic phrase, if you like, because they have their ordinary lives, but then they have to be in a Spanish Baroque court in the 17th century and play the role of whatever it is, even if it's the servant or the count or the countess, and they learn to take that transition into that world quite seriously, and to work together and to collaborate. And I'm hoping that that's what they find in it. They learn to give it their everything and lose themselves and find themselves, perhaps. Yeah.
In a sense, putting on The Marriage of Figaro is, I suppose, it's an inciting, not an incident, but an inciting opportunity for them to come together. I was very drawn to Felix. I really enjoyed how he saw the group of people meeting and talking about putting on a play, and he thought, aha, here we go. Can you tell us a bit about Felix and where his confidence in doing that came from, his motivation to volunteer his services, but to also suggest The Marriage of Figaro?
So I think he summoned the courage because he already had experience in the theatre. He previously studied drama, including Brechtian drama in Berlin. And he was actually studying engineering when as an exchange student, when he decides that he will take the lead in directing the play. So why does he do it? And I think he gets his confidence from his experience, but also as a desperation. He wants to escape the very circumscribed world of engineering and the career and future in that, and this chance that he sees advertised on a flyer at university, the players, the Dramatic Society meeting. He sees it as his chance to do something different, and also to perhaps bring something European to what is a very Australian context.
Something that springs to mind is Oscar Wilde saying all art is pointless. But at the same time, when all of these characters, all the people they're at university, they're trying to lay the foundations for, I suppose, a working life, but they're all attracted to doing something that to a very, I don't know, a more logical mind is pointless, but it's not. It's absolutely intrinsic to the human experience. Are each of the characters at that kind of inflection point where they're being pulled in those two ways?
Probably. Yes, they see the opportunity in the joining things like a play, and that the way that might extend them, and what that might offer them, whether it is an escape, a form of connection and enrichment, or actually potential for a career path, because all of them are affected by being in it, whether or not, it gives Joshua confidence, it gives Sebastian a certain sense of authority, it yes, makes Veronica think she might like to act, it allows Cassie to make some of the best friends of her life, Gloria too builds her own confidence and meets people and grows in her own way, and so they all become entangled in that process. So I see that endeavor as something connected to, also not that different from a kind of logical career path as well, if that answers your question.
Oh, well, without too many spoilers, I suppose. I'm not sure who's read and who hasn't who's listening, but in Raising the Stakes with the Marriage of Figaro, can you tell us what happens during putting on the play? How do each of the characters change? Who do you think changes the most in putting on this play to then set up the rest of the action in the book?
Well, I think each of the characters are tested in the production, just the magnitude of putting it on, of rehearsing in the heat of the summer, of trying to get along with one another, and trying to not fall in love with the wrong person and that sort of thing. I think they all grow from being it in some way. Some are disenchanted at the end of it. I think they grow mainly in the second part, where the magical days, the summer days, form the first half, and then the days of seriousness, growing up, and gravity, if you like, form the second half. So I think they all grow, probably mostly Sebastian. The ones that don't, I think it would be too much of a spoiler to mention, but they all learn different lessons to varying degrees. Does that answer your question?
It does. As maybe to echo with that, Deborah, what's your background with theatre? What's a connection do you have to theatre that inspired you to place a theatrical production at the center of your literary novel?
Yes, well, I grew up in a theatre family. I was surrounded by theatre and music. My mother was a director, choreographer, and producer of both amateur and professional theatre and music and opera and you name it, dance. And my father sings, my sister was in a band, my brother was in a band. They all had their day jobs, of course. So I grew up amid all of that, reading and singing and noise making. And yeah, I was in plays in my youth. And so I suppose the inspiration comes from those experiences, from travel, from my connection to certain places and landscapes, and mushing it all up, yeah,
Okay.
into a
And
novel.
so, and to you, what is the biggest challenge in performing? Is it the fear of getting on stage, or is it the letting go so that you can become in the flow when performing?
I haven't been on stage for, gosh, maybe 30 years or something, a long time.
Yeah.
So, what is the most difficult thing about it? Is that
Hmm. In your experience, or what's the most perhaps enjoyable aspect of
okay? Well, I think the most difficult and awful part is self-consciousness. Obviously, fear of looking like a fool. That sort of is a kind of ongoing fear. But the pleasure, I suppose, certainly for me, was the script.
Hmm.
I didn't have to be me. There was this script. It was marvelous, and it's a wonderful thing, wonderful elastic, luminous thing to inhabit someone else, even for a while. So I think even Veronica says that it's a kind of forgetting,
Yeah.
which is wonderful. So a lot of artists describe that in their work, in their art, where that they lose self-consciousness, and there's a flow and a beauty and a coherence and a harmony and all kinds of wonderful things.
That's a lovely segue as well to the next question with about Veronica. It is a kind of forgetting. What is Veronica trying to forget? She's a very strong character. I quite like her, but she's got, yeah, she's quite sharp elbows, let's just say.
Yes, yes, literally and metaphorically. What is she? You phrase the question again.
What is she trying to forget in herself?
What is she trying to forget? Well, yes, she has a complicated past, and it's not all revealed in the novel. It's alluded to and suggested. I think she's trying to forget her unresolved entanglements, and from her past. She's wrestling with guilt, and also with her own superficialities and limitations, her own vanity. Um, yeah. So I think she's perhaps trying to forget all those things. Yeah, and also I think being an immigrant, well, she herself is not the immigrant, her father's the immigrant. There's a strong need maybe to forget all of that and just find out who she is away from that side of her cultural identity. I think perhaps she might come later back to her roots, later in life.
There's a multiplicity of characters, but I never felt that I was switching gears, so to speak. It just happened so naturally. Was that a challenge to balance the needs and the insights from each of these characters, or was it because it's an ensemble? And given your also your theatrical background, your understanding of art and the process, was it, and your love of the script, as you said, was that almost like a joy to be able to go a little bit of this, little?
It was a bit. It was, yes. I mean, I love modernist literature, and that can often be about exploring different perspectives. The absence of a stable reality, and you just have the perceptions of these characters. So I was interested in exploring the different ways in which the characters experienced being in a play, putting on a production. And it moves temporally forward. So each character is passing on a baton to the next, almost like shifting camera angles.
Yes.
And I wanted to convey that, what's happening. I mean, there are flashbacks, but the timeline is that each character you're actually moving forward. So that was a lot of fun. And it was complicated, I guess. It was complicated. It was, it's both sort of harmonic and dissonant, if we're going to use musical metaphors to articulate that process.
Absolutely. I was going to say as well, I feel we could have a half an hour conversation on structure and doubling and all that.
Yes.
Can you tell us at least a flavor of the ribs of the story, the I suppose slightly behind the scenes, how everything was structured so that you would get this whole.
I suppose sorry. I had an image I just had an image like that of these diverse people coming together and creating something and then spinning off, spinning apart. That was basically the image that I had of the shape of the structure. The weaving of the different voices was just a kind of process, just a dance, really. Perhaps not all that conscious in the way I put it together, as in who goes next, but more a kind of tuning in and listening to who needed to emerge at which point. And I mean, the book, it asks readers to engage with that multiplicity in a way which might be seen as quite difficult, but that's what I wanted to create. So I'm interested in the way that fiction and novels can accommodate many voices.
Oh, indeed. And maybe just to take a step back, I really enjoyed that you showed the play, you showed them bringing on the play, rather than it being, oh, remember the time when we put on the play. You took the time to take us through the entire process and all of the things that happen, and then beautifully set up the rest of the novel with all of those other complications still going on, so that the narrative never felt forced. It like you said, it's a baton that was being passed, only because the link was because the baton was being passed, not because their lives were utterly dependent upon each other.
Yeah, sometimes they intersect, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just at the side of one another.
Yeah.
Which is like life, really, isn't it? We don't all form a wonderful, harmonious conclusion with everything. No.
Absolutely. And you also did a lot of research, and you engaged with sensitivity readers and cultural advisors. Can you tell us about that process and which characters you needed to apply that perhaps more to?
Yes, in writing an ensemble narrative, I didn't want to create a story about these culturally homogenous people. That would have not only been tedious to me, but also inaccurate. I grew up with people from everywhere. And so it was important for me to do my research, if you like. I wanted to explore the character of Gloria and sketched her out, but also did a lot of reading on Timor-Leste and the history, and sought a cultural consultant. He was wonderfully helpful, has his own extraordinary story, and I do hope he will write he's performed it. He's an actor as well, so he was helpful. So I wrote some scenes, and then another cultural consultant and sensitivity reader who spent years in Timor-Leste and steeped in the history of Timor-Leste was also a sensitivity reader, and they both worked together reading and commenting on her scenes, the facts, and if something was perhaps not sounding quite right or was insensitive. It was a wonderful process, and they were enormously generous and, yeah, very helpful. I also sought input from some other people who are not like me, readers for the character of Felix in particular, a couple of different readers, and that they were wonderful to work with and helpful. I had people read a few other things, but not too many. I didn't want to engage too many inputs because there were already a lot of characters, and I had an editor, and it was important to be respectful of those characters, for them to be authentic, but for them to be themselves, and also for the artistic needs of the story, the character, and to also be made important to be important, not just factual or accurate, but alive. And yeah, they're all themselves, these characters. They, you know, they found out who they were, and they had a little bit of help from their friends. Yes.
Could you tell us a bit about Gloria, and her journey, and what being in the marriage of Figaro, I suppose, meant in the beginning, and then perhaps what it meant toward the end?
Yeah, I haven't thought too much about that, actually. I feel like she feels that, yes, she's a little bit separate at the beginning. She's got her own social life and her own sort of distance from the players to begin with. But she gradually, in being in the play, in enjoying it, in getting to know various people, she becomes quite immersed and quite involved. She also feels quite divided, that her activities away from her family and her friends kind of make her feel a bit split. But I think it gives her a great deal of confidence as she goes on and return as a teacher, and as she returns to her country at the time of independence. And she works in an orphanage and is able to really think in very creative and collaborative ways about how she might assist these young girls. So I think, yes, her experience of being in a play is a positive one for her. But it is thorny, of course, because there's so many different. I mean, it's something I love about writing, is exploring all those differences and dissonances between different cultures. And, you know, a 17th century play, and, you know, the heat, you know, the sweaty heat of a Perth summer, and you know, the very Europeanness of such a play, and the very different atmosphere in a country like Timor-Leste, which has its own Portuguese, its own European influence or colonization as well. So I guess these were echoes that I was wanting to explore broader sort of through the characters, whether it were kind of political issues or issues of colonization, culture and language, the importance of one's mother tongue, even with the different layers of language, and Felix with his fumbling through English, and you know, that sort of thing. And characters for whom English, you know, they can completely, it's like a kind of clay that they can mold with ease and dexterity. And they can manipulate with it and through it. But also different registers and voices and classes, and anyway, it's a bit endless, really. It's a modest enterprise. The players.
Well, it's something I'd probably just like to say. I loved that this book is unabashedly intricate. But it illuminates those intricacies because they're interesting and because they're there. And if we don't illuminate them, then we're in denial. And so I was let's say maybe 10 pages in, I was like, oh, it's about a play, it's about a group of people. And then the further I got in, it was just, whoa, there is so much here. And one door led to another, led to another, led to another. It constantly resists the need for simplicity. It was always, here's something else, here's another layer, here's some more intricacy. Was that a challenge to perhaps to pare back or to lean into? Because
yeah.
I love that you did it, because it made everything so much more interesting and rich. It was lovely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was even more elaborate. Yeah, it's just yeah, it felt very layered to me as well. I think because I traveled with it for a long time, so it kept wanting more, and more kept being added. And when I had the structural edit, there was more that was needed, and I was okay. Here we go,
More
completing the different character arcs. It felt sort of gargantuan, and but then I get into it, you know. So I think it's perhaps about complexity is a theme. And I mean, our lives are complex, aren't they? They're kind of, you can't really capture them properly. They're a bit of a tangle.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, if you can vaguely order that and throw it together and see what happens, then I suppose that, and make a novel of it. That's something. Yeah.
I would thoroughly agree. It was, I mean, to say it's complexity in service of the characters, in service of the story. It's, I wanted to know more, which was, it was lovely to get that, to get more. So in creating this art, were you in service of that? Like listening to what did the story need? What do these characters need?
That's right. Yeah, it involved a lot of deep listening of what they needed in a narrative sense, in a character development sense, in a to capture their authenticity and their own density, if you like. Certainly their flaws and their foibles and their various acts of heroism and courage and boldness, which surprised me. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Was it?
I'm going to be carried away.
Was there is there another story or novel that which inspired you, which perhaps gave you a model?
Well, many different books. I do love meta theatre, anything meta theatrical. Actually, the film The Travelling Players by Andronopoulos. It's a 1975 film by a brilliant Greek filmmaker about a group of actors who I think it spans a number of years. They're putting on, I think, a Greek tragedy, but then they all start enacting the characters that they get cast into. It sort of seem to hover over the rest of their lives, and it's during World War II and various blitzes in Greece, and it's an epic film, and it very much stayed with me, and I was very interested in that. So so pretty much everything I've ever read. I don't know, the great novels, the great big fat novels. I love Dickens. I love 19th century realism and all that. I think yeah, the kind of plurality of existence is something I just wanted to capture. I don't think I would necessarily want to do it again. That's something I had to get out of my system. Other influences, yeah, a lot of I love the work of Stefan Zweig, he's Swiss. Is he Swiss or Austrian? He's wonderful. His kind of character studies are brilliant. Yes, I need to think more about this. But yes, lots of plays, of course, Chekhov's plays that I truly love as well. Actually, the first grown-up play that I ever saw was The Cherry Orchard at the Perth Playhouse.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
My mother took the whole family there. I was 9 years old. In fact, I was so bored that I wept. I wept with boredom. I think the infinite subtleties of Chekhov for a 9-year-old. You know? But something must have stayed despite kind of feeling like I might die. A couple of years later, Mum then took us all to a production at the Subiaco Theatre Centre, and it was Heinrich Ibsen's A Doll's House. And it was starring Greta Scacchi and Michael Loney. And they were incredible in that. Yeah. And I loved it. I thought, wow, well, actually, this theatre thing isn't as desperately dull as I thought it was. So, yes, those sort of pretty much plays, Shakespeare's plays. He loves a good play within a play. No play does it better than Hamlet. The play within the play. Yeah, who are the players? I think they're even called the players. Yeah, so lots of things.
A question perhaps then for the players. Is the experience of being in the play, given what happens to each of them throughout the book, is it transformative? or experience, or is it just an experience?
I think it's both. I think it is transformative. I think that something magical happens when these characters have to play a character who is not themselves, even if they're a little bit themselves in the character. They have to rise to the occasion. But also, I think it says something that through rehearsing, through playing, that you can live vicariously. Obviously, writing fiction and entering the fictional world is the same. And that actually builds certain muscles, imaginative muscles, physical muscles, you know. Suddenly got an image of all these very muscly characters kind of lifting weights. That's not really what I meant. But there's a kind of vicarious experience and enrichment that then can absolutely prepare you for life and give you an edge. A lot of drama teachers, not that I've ever been one, say that it's skills for life, you know, learning how to get up there and, you know, do your thing, but also to learn how to think about others and empathize, and yeah, which is what you learn through acting. And I think these characters do learn from, I do think it's transformative. They meet people too that shape their destiny in some way. Yeah.
Deborah, would you perhaps give us a taste of the players? We've got a chapter picked out, I think. Would you?
Okay. Yes, sure. A pleasure. So I've just chosen something quite random. A scene from later on in the novel. The character Joshua is working on a ship. And yeah, so this is well after he's been in The Marriage of Figaro. Voices. He shrugged them away, turned in his bunk, heavy head, stale sweat. He closed his eyes again, swam back into his dream, a woman bending over him, her warmth. Red, a light stung through his eyelids. Josh, your turn. He winced. Nah, he moaned into his pillow, pulled the covers closer, stretched out his legs. He'd flung about for hours on the tiny bed, never enough room for his impossible limbs. All night he'd been like this. Or was it day? He'd lost track of time. He might as well have been drifting in a spaceship, spinning off the edge of the world. Up you get! Josh felt Warra prodding him, heard the tug and slip of a perpetual wave above him. Christ, don't feel so good, he said. She'll be right. Josh didn't move. My turn to sleep, mate. Come on, time to get up. He still couldn't move. Been at it 19 hours straight, Josh. Come on, you bastard. Oh, Christ. Josh sprang from the bed, wonky, skull-flooded, dizzy. I'm done, Warwick said, lips barely moving. He brushed off his beanie, unzipped his jacket, kicked off his shoes, dived into bed. Josh was starving. He stumbled into the kitchen, grabbed a couple of meat pies from the freezer, shoved them in the microwave. Shook as he ate them, almost swallowed them whole. He squirted condensed milk from a tube into a mug, added scalding coffee from the urn. He drank, then rinsed his face. Felt as ready as he'd ever been. He climbed up onto the deck. Nighttime. The wind was up. Chill hit him like stones. Stench of bait everywhere. Diesel fumes, rancid fish, bird shit. The others were in front of a winch, hauling in a big swordfish. Must be close to 6 feet. Josh caught a glimpse of a glassy wave hovering behind the boat. 3 men reaching forward with their long gaffs. Someone was cheering. The lights of the boat spilled out onto the ocean like rippling columns in the dark. Josh had once imagined the splendour and solace of an evening at sea, the brilliance of stars. But here on the stinking boat, clouds clogged the dark sky. The stars and the moon were barely visible. Without light, he was merely a pair of hands, a breath, wordless, exhausted. How long had he been on the boat? As long as it took to stop feeling the pain, jamming squid onto hooks, dropping buoys, hoisting up the fish, hands, bleeding down the gaff. He remembered things, too. Images flashed like negatives. His father's looming, angry face, Veronica's gentle kiss. He'd had no luck with women. On the point of moving in with Gloria, he chickened out when he'd liked her, warmed to her. But he'd made the right decision in the end, made a clean break from her and all the players, whatever they were called. It felt like a lifetime ago. He made himself snap out of it, focus on the work, join the men in jabbing the huge fish with his gaff, dragging its great body towards the hull, this slick silver animal with its lethal sword. It flapped furiously, died. They rolled it on top of a dolphin fish, and then Josh felt his gut convulsing, food crawling up into his throat, exploding out of his mouth, onto his face, hands and feet. You've got to keep your food down, someone said. No good being seasick. Josh shivered. He'd been sick for 9 days. He had another 5.5 weeks to go, with no sense of how he'd endure it.
Thank you, Deborah. That was wonderful. I just as a comment on the prose, I love the present tense, how precise it is and how honest at all times. And it just adds up to this poetic spell. When you came to write, I mean, you'd written nonfiction previously. When it came to write fiction, and in a literary style, did you have to switch, or did you just seek to express what you could?
Yeah, I think fiction is much more difficult for me than non-fiction. It's a different brain. It's a different. I mean, obviously, the craft of a sentence and chiseling a sentence, you're kind of conscious of that. Obviously, much more conscious in fiction. It's much more difficult because you're kind of stepping off into space, whereas with non-fiction, you've got a thing there to base your words on. So yeah, it was really involved inhabiting a different self in a way. I'd have to leave my desk at home and at work and just go away to different spaces and places and nature and just become anonymous and, at one with the trees and plants, and in order to hear the words and the characters and solicit them. Yes, sometimes they would impose themselves, but other times I had to kind of coax them out of the ground or out of the trees or the sky or the supermoon or whatever it is.
Tonight, indeed. We've got a lovely comment in the comments from William Budislick. Thank you. He said, agreed, that was superb. And if anyone's got a question or a comment for Deborah, please jump in. And well, great. We've got a question here from Peter straight away. So, Deborah, Peter Beck is asking, what was the purpose of Charlie in the novel?
Yeah, Charlie is the antagonist, mainly the antagonist for Veronica, but also for the rest of the characters, to some extent to Joshua as well. So he throws obstacles in the way, but I was interested in exploring the way he can be a force for, perhaps a force for good as well, in a kind of weird, bizarre way. I didn't want a two-dimensional villain, if you can call him that. His purpose was a bit of spice things up. Yeah, I think that was part of his purpose. Yeah, he wasn't always in the novel. He came very late. I mean, he was always in the novel. His point of view came very late in the drafting. Yeah.
And maybe just to chime in on Peter's question, it's the precision and honesty of your prose. It allows you to really dig into the motivations of these characters. So no one's two-dimensional, as you said. It's you really get a feeling of we may not sympathize with Charlie's motivations, but we can understand them, not in the sense that we tolerate them, but we get why he's doing it.
Mm. Yeah, well, I wanted the readers to travel with the characters and me to travel with them too, in a kind of contemplative sense, which might sound lofty, but it's actually quite simple. It's, if you break down the word con, meaning from the Latin with, and tem, meaning time or condition or season, and plative, which is from the Greek platos, which means breadth of vision, an expanded vision. So I wanted to write these characters with a kind of expanded vision and disposition, which would mean including all elements of them. So which might mean humanizing a villain and that sort of thing. And so perhaps that's why Charlie emerged and why he's there. It wasn't a virtuous enterprise. In fact, I began at the beginning being quite judgmental of him and judgmental of some of my characters until an actor friend of mine said, "Don't you dare." And I thought, oh, why is that? Why can't, he's awful. He's a creep. He's a, scoundrel. And she just said, no, you can't approach your characters. You have to honor them, and they are who they are. And I was like, okay. So I think those different approaches came into my depiction of characters, and perhaps someone like Charlie. Yeah, I mean, I had fun with him too, but I kind of, I had to take a shower after writing this. Yeah. And some people just love him, and other people wanted more of him, and then some people just like, they actually kind of don't want to read him because they feel like, oh, I can't read.
Kind of annoyed me.
Sorry?
He kind of annoyed me, but I was like,
that's right. Yeah. I mean,
But as you said, they are who they are. But also, this novel spans decades. It spans so they are who they are at the time, and we also get to see they are who they are later. And perhaps there's still that intrinsic part of them, but they're also changing. Can we maybe switch to say Sebastian as a character? Can we? What's his arc, and how does he change? But also, how does he stay the same?
Yeah, look, some people love him, some people don't. So it's interesting, different responses. Yeah, so he starts off quite entitled, arrogant, ready, thinks he can pretty much do what he likes within reason. He's not entirely unbearable, but borderline unbearable. But he, through being in the play, through having various disappointments befall him, shall we say, and, kind of breaking free from his family's expectations, he changes. And through having his hopes dashed, like all the characters have their hopes dashed to some extent, this forces him to change. He's an interesting character. I had an editor friend do a proofread, actually, before I submitted the manuscript to the publisher. And she just rang me and said, look, he just wouldn't do some of the things that he does in this. You have to take this scene out, that scene out, And I said, really? And she said, oh, yes. And I said, why? And she said, well, because I have a crush on him and he wouldn't do that. and then I actually had to, I had to leave those scenes in because he wouldn't have the character development if he didn't. So that's a little bit his character arc. I mean, the characters are all themselves all the way through, but they do also grow and stretch. Yeah. But occasionally kind of bounce back to their old self.
These are great insights, Deborah. I really appreciate it.
I don't know.
And if anyone has another question for Deborah, please jump into the chat. We're kind of getting toward the end of our session here, but I feel like we could go on for another hour because I've still got a lot of questions to ask. But Deborah, where did the inspiration come for the players? I've read that you were on a plane and I think you were coming back from Amsterdam and you had a flash.
Yeah, I did. I had a flash. It came to me in a flash. The Australian bush characters from all over, all having to, get their act together, pun intended, and put on a play, and the various mayhem and mishaps that happen in that process, and then how that refracts, if you like, for the years following. I mean, these moments bring people together. It tears them apart. Some people, for others, it's not all that significant. But I think, that's where the inspiration came from. It also came from just spaces and places that I've been, walking through the bush and, through the landscape, travel. Yeah, things that I love. Was in a bit of theatre as a young person. I was Eliza Doolittle at the Perth Concert Hall, I think, when I was 16. And, been in various Shakespeare plays at the Dolphin Small Theatres and in a play in the Seymour Centre in Sydney. So it's not actually based on any of that, but rather just different sort of strands and fragments and impressions and from those experiences. So they all went into inspiring me, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, life is full of so many obligations. And I think when you look back at those times when you were able to be in plays or things like that, not everyone gets that chance. You can become nostalgic. And so perhaps it's a bit nostalgic as well.
That's a great point as well. It's the sacrifice of time, but
Yeah.
they were able to sacrifice that time, even though perhaps other influences told them not to, but they did. And it's their probably, it was the one chance they had to do something like that in their lives.
Mm.
Can we return as well to your flash of inspiration of the Australian bush? Of your depiction of light in this book, in whatever setting that we're in, whatever country that we're in, I can always feel the light. And I had the impression also, I think I wrote this to you, that of a long afternoon gradually winding down throughout the book. Would you care to respond to that, or how, I'm not sure of the question here, but the observation of that feeling that came across for me at least. What sort of feeling were you trying to capture in the entirety of the book?
Well, thank you for that lovely question and for your observations. I hadn't noticed the light in the book at all. I'm a bit photosensitive myself, very sensitive to the sun. So maybe it's sort of one of my obsessions is light. I had a dear friend, Melinda, who used to say, as she travelled through Europe, "Oh, I'm just chasing light." We would marvel at the beautiful nuanced light of Europe and the kind of bleaching sun of, like, I think Perth's about as bright as it gets, even slightly brighter than perhaps Sydney, and so maybe it comes from that, just from light, from experiences of light. Where I try to amplify particular themes as a novel, maybe a voice. Yeah, that's quite observant, Peter. Yes, perhaps so, through the different scenes. I mean, there's also the blinding light of the stage. I don't know if anyone's been on stage, but you actually can't see anything because the lights are like choof, 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 and you're sweating, and you just hope that it all, looks okay because you have no idea of what it is. And so there's that being illuminated, lit up. Also, there's the idea of, the tableau vivant. I kind of thought, gosh, why put a phrase like that in my open page when a lot of people might even know what it is? But, a moment that is illuminated. And I suppose I wanted to just have these flashes, if you like, of different moments in time throughout. So maybe that does tie in, feeling rather associative here, to the question of voices and different themes, perhaps refrains. Yeah, there are a lot of refrains and ironies that happen throughout the book, echoes and ironies.
And doublings as well, quite a lot of
doublings. Yeah, brothers and sisters. Yeah, they're all forming pairs and then unpairing and rearranging. I mean, I did have, one of a play I was in where we had to do a sort of dance scene based on fencing and sword fighting, so I had a scene of sort of people shuffling and musical chairs and shifting. So I think, of a dance. So there would be pairs and doubles, foils, just get happening. So the different characters.
Maybe staying with visual, Deborah, can we talk about your cover?
Okay, yeah.
The UWA peacocks, right?
Yes. I love a good peacock. Yeah.
And,
I mean, they're all peacocks, aren't they, when they're on the stage? They're all preening their feathers and strutting their stuff. So, yeah. How did this cover come about? Well, there's a bit of tugging back and forth, shall we say. This was a cover put together by Nada Bakovic, who's a very
Mm.
talented cover designer.
Fine.
It began with I thought she looked like the woman from the match at the front of the matches, the redhead matches.
Yes, yeah.
So she was there first in the middle, and there was a different background, one that was just all peacocks, like sort of greeny. It was quite different. It was a little, it sort of sent a different message about the book. And I asked, got into battle, asked for something a bit more sober and perhaps suggest that it's not just a girl's summer read. I'm happy if it is, but that maybe it's literary fiction. I didn't want people to pick up the book and think they were going to get whatever, the airport read of their dreams, So I battled for a darker background and got it. Thank you for the very kind people at Frio Press who allowed me some input in the cover, because I know that a lot of authors don't have input into their covers. And yeah, so I had a little bit of input, which was very kind of them. And I'm very glad, because I think it's a really lovely cover. And I think it speaks to the intricacy of the kind of, ivy vine of the the grapevine, the plum trees and the blossoms and the
The plum tree
Japanese
blossoms.
pepper trees that are in the book, the birds and and having a whole ensemble cast on the cover wasn't going to work either, because it would just be too kind of distracting. So I think the core character who has the most airplay, although I don't believe is perhaps the primary character on the front cover. So yeah. That was the story of the cover. So I lucked out, basically, the short answer to that. Yeah.
Definitely did. And can you tell us a bit about the editorial process, working with Fremantle Press to bring the players together? Was it a case of I think we spoke before, it was can you add some more? Because there's a lot, but were you encouraged to really?
Yes, I was encouraged to expand it by significantly. I expanded it by 30,000 words, which I had to work on in a fairly small period of time. So I had a substantial structural edit, which was really helpful and quite exacting. And then I had to generate quite a lot more material, which was a challenge, because I had a lot going on with my mother gravely ill and full-time work. But the characters wanted to be more fleshed out. There were certain things that were unresolved and things a bit thin. So that process was difficult and challenging and hard. And I would do things differently, looking back, a lot of things differently now, but it was what it was, shall we say. But it was great to work.
Did you find that deeper you went into the process compared to when you were starting out, that you can just, if you need to write 30,000 words, you can?
Yes, I did. I discovered that if you need to, you can. I mean, I have to have certain things in place. It's going to be really difficult if I have to just only do half an hour a day. I had to arrange time away or take time off or things like that. You kind of have to rearrange your life to prioritize these people who want their story to be told. But you can.
You worked on the plays for many years in many different parts of the world. Can you tell us about a few of the places that you wrote in or that you were inspired by?
The actual writing of it was perhaps around 4 years. The idea was stewing around many, many years earlier. So it's sort of been there for a long time, but the actual writing of it, little bits and pieces all over the place. Yes, was lucky enough to spend a bit of time in the south of France, where I drafted quite a lot of rehearsal scenes at the Catherine Susanna Pritchard Writers Centre. I was able to tune in to the wonderful bushscape there and work on some of that. And writing a little bit in Paris. I write a lot on the Central Coast of New South Wales. So I live now about 90 minutes north of Sydney in Darkinjung country, which is beautiful and very inspiring for writers. So I wrote a lot there in a beach shack, but I've moved here now somewhere else. And yeah, it's wonderfully conducive. Yeah, like where else did I did a little bit of writing in Timor-Leste, although I got violently ill when I was there, but extremely, extremely ill. I was ill for a very long time. So I couldn't do that much writing there. But I did a bit, and yeah, so I've been very fortunate to be able to have spaces in which to write and see this cacophonous, polyphonic tome of a thing come into existence. Yeah.
Well, I guess a natural question then is, what's been more exciting, seeing it in a library or seeing it on a bookshelf?
I don't think I've seen it in a library yet. People have sent me photos. Oh, your book's in the Kalamunda Library. Oh, it's very exciting seeing it on a bookshelf. In fact, my name is next to Peter Polites, Polides, who I think is an extraordinary writer. It's like, oh my goodness, my spine is next to the spine of his works. It is remarkable. It's wonderful. It's kind of strange though, because it becomes an object that in a way is not you, and in a way weirdly has nothing to do with you in a way. I feel like, yes, that's right. Did you feel that way, David, when your book came out?
I did.
Yes, something that is other. Yeah.
Deborah, you've been so generous with your answers tonight. It's an extraordinary book, The Players, and it's been really extraordinary to talking to you. We've only got a couple of minutes left, really, but I'd like to ask you a question. In what book sparked your love of reading, and what are you reading now that you would recommend?
Okay, what book sparked? Well, I can't remember particular books, but I can remember authors. So I enjoyed as a young person reading works of Thomas Keneally and Colin Tearley, and weirdly enough, Henry Handel Richardson. But I also binge read the works of Robin Klein and Ruth Park. So I loved actually Australian literature as a young person. What am I reading now? Yes. What am I reading now? So many books. I can't keep up with them. Should I read a book called Shirley, which I really recommend, forgotten the author, but I can highly recommend Peter Polides' God Forgets About the Poor, which is a beautiful novel, quite astonishing, about a Greek immigrant woman and her son, and it goes on. So yeah, but I love also delving back into the classics and yeah.
I was going to say, well, Deborah, it's been absolutely fantastic speaking to you. The Players is a triumph, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you
thank you.
Wow, it's been great. And thank you to everybody here at the Libby Book Club for WA for joining us tonight. Jordana Jordanovska says, enjoyed your book. So
thank you, Jordana, and thank you to everyone who's reading it and who's part of the Libby Book Club and whoever's turned up, and a huge thank you, and I'm enormously appreciative of your support, and to you, David, for being such a wonderful interviewer, like really fabulous questions, and a careful and thoughtful reader as well. Shirley by Ronnie Scott. Yes, thanks, Julian. It's now 10 p.m. past my bedtime in New South Wales. So, yeah.
Pleased to say we have next month, we've actually got The Skeleton House by Catherine Allen, another Fremantle Press title. So Fremantle Press is putting out some stunning books this year, and The Players is from by Deborah Pike from Freo Press is one of them. So thank you very much for coming on, Deborah, and have a good evening. It was lovely.
My pleasure. You too. Thanks, David. Bye.
Everybody, thanks for your company. See you.